Welcome back, everyone. This is part 3 for this news bulletin today. It's Wednesday, December 26, 2012. My website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube is ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. The headlines and links should be in YouTube's video description. However, I wasn't able to do that on Friday because I had some technical issues. Basically, my computer was under attack so much I could barely even do anything. I had to reinstall my operating system over the weekend, and just today didn't have any problems since then. It's just about to record, and I got a blue screen crash. So I'm still under attack, and there's no guarantee that I'll be able to continue doing this. But for however long I can, I'm going to keep covering the same information. So it says here, far from the image of heavily armed populations where ordinary people have their own arsenals, of course this is all loaded to repel attackers, Israel allows its people to acquire firearms only if they can prove their professions or places of residence put them in danger. So the country relies on its security services, not armed citizens, to prevent terror attacks. So this is just a really loaded paragraph saying that Americans have arsenals. And the thing is I heard this recently. If it's a pretty good point. Those that want all these gun restrictions, you can go ahead and put a sign in your window that says this is a gun-free zone, and then you can invite all of these people who have guns, who don't abide by gun laws or anything because they're criminals, and they'll go in there and they'll kill you and your family and steal your property. But hey, that'll reduce the gun violence. Interesting, though, this article actually goes in there and praises Israel and all of its policies. They say that though military service in Israel is compulsory, routine familiarity with weapons does not carry over into civilian life. Israel has far fewer private weapons per capita than the U.S., and it says because they're more enslaved, that's why they have compulsory military. And while there have been gangster shootouts in the streets from time to time, gun rampages outside the context of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the conflict, that's occupation and colonization of land that they stole, is basically unheard of. It's interesting too because most of these lone shooters, these big publicized lone shooters, in my mind is actually a Zionist psychological operation. So I think that's why it would be unheard of, because they're not going to do it in their own country, because they already disarmed their people. They don't have to do it. But here in the United States, we live in a Zionist-occupied territory, so that they want to make sure they disarm their subjects. Gun owners freak out after a newspaper publishes their names and addresses. I talked about how we have all this voluntary, we're actually having voluntary gun restrictions by companies themselves and investors, such as Cerberus, whatever the owner, investment firm in the AR-15's Bushmaster company. So a lot of self-censorship and stuff like that going on. It says here, an owned newspaper in Westchester, New York, has published a map showing the names and addresses of licensed gun owners. Gun permits are already public records, and it says on the convenient map, makes it easier for people to determine which house and people in their neighborhoods are armed and which aren't. So I guess you can look at it this way. It's going to be one place that thieves and stuff aren't going to go, right? But it says gun owners are freaking out about the publication of this information, saying it invites attacks on and robberies on their households of non-gun owners. And also, actually, that's what it does. They're going to go to the people that don't have guns, and also encourages gun thefts at the households that own them. It says some of the gun owners interviewed say they're not a threat to their neighbors, so the neighbors have no business knowing that they have any guns. It is pretty just a crazy situation, because I keep seeing this in the local media on the AM channels and conservative radio. I think because I don't think all guns should be banned in America. I just think military-grade assault weapons should be banned. So I don't understand where people come up with this stuff, because if technically it's your right that people a long time ago supposedly bled and died for, so that you could have the right to have the same equal firepower to take on your government if you have to. If they start pulling crap like this, what do you want to do, you dumbass? Do you want to take a pitchfork and go against a laser-guided drone? I mean, it's already bad enough. I've already said that if the right and the I hate to say this, I'm sorry if I offend some people, but I think Alex Jones is there to create the 10% to rise up and create this revolution prematurely. And if they do that, it's going to be a bloodbath, and a lot of people are going to die. And if they institute a new republic or new government after the, quote, revolution, it's going to be completely engineered, and it's going to be set up by the opposition. That's why you're going to be considered controlled opposition. But for whatever it's worth, back then they set it up so that you don't have to fight with pitchforks against the British Army, who has muskets and stuff like that and cannons. So if you don't like that, then maybe you should just move out. I don't think you should be deported, but maybe just voluntarily pack your shit and get out. You can go move to Israel. You can go move to Europe. In Europe, they've been peasants for a long time. That's all they've known, is to be peasants and been disarmed. But we have something unique here in America. So if you don't like that and you don't know your history, and you want to equate every single country as the same, well, then you should maybe go somewhere else. San Francisco and but like I said, the main thing is that a lot of this actually, when these people buy these weapons and they go out there and they do their frenzy buying because they think that the government's going to come and get their guns. Like I said, I have to put this out there. I don't think that this is the point. It's actually people, when they really should be saving their money or spending on other things, they're going to be spending on all these weapons. And when it comes down to it, this militarized police state, this gargantuan defense, $600 billion, that's what they tell us, defense budget, is going to rain down on you. And it doesn't really matter if you have a crappy AR-15 that jams every time, like the Colorado shooter and the all the other recent shooters, including the Sandy Hook shooter. They all jammed. It's not going to do anything. You're not going to win against a big fight like that unless they want you to win, unless they allow you to win. So you're just going to fund the military-industrial complex that produces these weapons. And really, the thing that's being ignored here is that it's all about censorship right now. The First Amendment's under attack. They're doing a lot of things to censor people and what they say. So that it's all about diversion, diverting people's attention. Talking about voluntarily giving up guns, San Francisco and Oakland crowds hand over guns in Buyback. This is the second program I've seen since then. It says in San Francisco and Oakland on Saturday, citizens brought their guns to sell to the revenue collectors known as political law enforcement officers in return for cash. Which is really sad, because we're talking about Oakland and stuff like that. It can get kind of hairy at night and stuff like that. And probably even in parts of San Francisco. So you might want to be armed, especially if civil unrest or the economy degrades even further. But apparently, these people are desperate enough that they would rather, be able to get their $200 or get their cash, basically money. So, but they're not going to have them when the crap hits the fan, or when the economy goes down in flames. Says the police chief. When we remove guns off our streets, that could be used in a crime. We reduce the possibility of our youth and our community being a victim. So this is an interesting thing, too, to note. Over the weekend, we had this firefighter who got shot while going in there. And everybody's, that sucks and everything. But something that I noticed in a video recently about 2012 and that is this cycle, which is the fear of death cycle. So basically, one of the things that you never think about is people who have a victim mentality. It's about creating victims. You have the perpetrators, i.e. the person who's desperate or greedy enough to go in someone's house and hold them up at gunpoint and try to steal their property or do them harm. Then you have the victim. The victim, of course, can try not to be a victim, arm themselves, and try to defend themselves. Then you have the rescuer, which is the political law enforcement pig, who's usually never there to be to prevent the problem. It takes 5 minutes for them to get to the scene after shots are fired, so they're not going to actually be there to help you. And also with firemen. The thing with firemen, too, is that they are afraid of death. And so all this thing does is this creates a victim mentality by allowing people to not defend themselves and assert their sovereignty and determine their own fate. And then you have these rescuers, these police, and these firemen who give a false sense of security and further create this victimization cycle, this cycle of fear, because they fear death. And of course, fear leads into slavery. In other words, we get this fear of death cycle, of course, is initiated by the perpetuator, which is usually the media. You have the victim and the rescuer. It says the rescuer is actually just another victim, because they fear that we are not infinite beings, that we basically just die and that's it and that's all. And the biggest driver of this, of course, is ego, which is usually law enforcement and and rescuers and stuff like that, they usually have pretty big egos, and that leads to fear and fear of death. But the biggest solution, of course, is increasing our responsibility, taking responsibility for our own actions. The United Nations approved a new debate on arms treaty opposed by U.S. gun lobby. The UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly on Monday to restart negotiations on a draft international treaty to regulate the $70 billion global trade in conventional arms, a pact that powerful U.S. National Rifle Association has been lobbying hard against. Then you have the United Nations wants a 5% budget increase. So they approved a 5% budget increase for 2012-2013, with half of the additional spending going towards the UN's political missions. In a time of global austerity, the UN's career diplomats have decided they deserve more cash. You know, it's interesting. It was pointed out by Stuart Swerdlow over this past weekend about the number 3 and the 3 events of Sandy that included the term Sandy that basically revolved around this whole event. And I know there's a lot of conspiracies out there and stuff like that as to what was really behind this. But my only point was that that this thing didn't just happen organically and spring up out of the ether. That this was kind of a planned event, and this thing known as Sandy Island is a landmass basically disappeared, and that was from 1123. And of course you have Hurricane Sandy. I completely forgot about that. Hurricane Sandy. It was named Sandy. And then you had the Sandy Hook massacre. Also, just like the shooting in Colorado, there was the Libor scandal connection with the Sandy Hook shooting. It says the father of this, Peter Lanza, was a tax director for General Electric, a corporation that paid zero taxes on $14 billion in profits last year. Lanza was scheduled to testify in the ongoing global Libor scandal, which can only be described as an amazing coincidence. Just like the father of Colorado Batman shooter, James Holmes was also a Libor witness. Let's not forget that also one of the victims that was shot in the theater was actually supposed to, he was releasing a book or a documentary, I believe, about aliens. So there's always many reasons why this stuff happens. Killing witnesses, killing certain types of people, silencing them, going for political things like gun control, getting censorship, again, attacking, the crazy white guy with beards and stuff like that. There's all kinds of psychological, political, and economic reasons for these things, for these events. Sandy Hook is labeled a strike zone in The Dark Knight Rises. Many of you have already seen this. It says that another coincidence. After the mass shooting in Colorado, it says here, the word Aurora was spotted in bright lights atop a building in The Dark Knight Rises. Now it seems that the name Sandy Hook also has ties to the Batman flick. And just like the Bin Laden raid, where many of the SEALs of the team actually died, New York City Lifeguard, hailed as hero during Sandy, drowns in Puerto Rico, floating near a surfboard. So it was a sacrifice? I don't know. I just watched the movie The Mechanic, with Ben Foster and that British guy who's in all those action movies, and he shows it right in the beginning how they would like to make things look like accident, like the guy swimming in the pool drowns. Then you have commanding officer of this SEAL team 4 dies in apparent suicide. Records show the FBI monitored the Occupy movement, including communications and planning. They also looked on, the police looked at Facebook and tweets as well. Santa Claus arrested for chalking in Austin. It was an Occupy activist who was handing out chalk to children while dressed as Santa Claus. Says here the Texas DPS officers chased him down handcuffed, and the crowd appeared shocked. One woman yelling in confusion, "You're arresting Santa Claus." Maybe that's because the FBI is monitoring it. Last minute, Congress drops requirement to obtain a warrant to monitor email. So they dropped the key amendment to legislation that's now headed to the White House for approval that will allow to access Americans' emails without a warrant. Senate, they're probably already doing it anyways. Senate approves indefinite military detention of U.S. citizens that had been approved again by the Senate. This time, however, they had the chance to add protections for Americans accused of terrorist ties and decided against it. So big deal. And although the Pentagon dismissed some of China's touted military advances, there's 8 ways China's military is catching up to the U.S. Go there and check them out. Russians risk jail if they avoid conscription for the army. More news coming from the John Moore Show that talks about more Russian Spetsnaz. He said Mongols and Asians, Chinese soldiers in Colorado walking around telling veterans to get away from where they were at, and UN helicopters. Thank you.